In his time, Jean-Baptiste Lamarck lived in obscurity and poverty. His most famous achievement, his theory of evolution, is largely discredited by modern science. In contrast, he is considered to be the first person to create a comprehensive, complete theory of organic evolution applicable to all life on Earth, and an influential figure in the study of natural history and invertebrates. Jean-Baptiste Pierre-Antoine Lemonnier Chevalier de Lamarck entered the world on August 1, 1744, in a small village in northern France, being the youngest of 11 children in a family of the lesser nobility. With the intent of his family, he was on track to become a priest, joining the Jesuits in 1756. However, tragedy struck after his father's death and the expulsion of Jesuits from France, causing the now teenage Lamarck to join the French army in the 7 Years' War, quickly earning himself the title of officer due to the bravery shown in his first battle. After peace was declared and the 7 Years' War was over, Lamarck spent 5 years in the south of France on garrison duty. Whilst on garrison duty, he gained his fascination of plants, collecting them until an injury forced him to resign from the army in 1768. After leaving the army, Lamarck found a job as a bank teller in Paris and expanded upon his fascination of plants by studying medicine and botany, the latter of which he would quickly become an expert at. In 1778, he caught the attention of the Royal Botanic Garden, the Jardin du Roi, also known as the Jardin des Plantes, by claiming he could create the most efficient system for the identification of plants in France, and with the support of the Botanic Gardens director, published his book, Fleurs Francis, centering, of course, around the plants of France. Around the same time, he married a woman named Marie Anne Rosalie Delapour, to whom he had 6 children with before her death in 1792. Due in part to the release of the Fleurs Francis and the director's involvement, he was appointed assistant botanist at the Jardin du Roi, which conveniently for Lamarck was also a center for medical education and biological research. In 1793, in part due to the French Revolution, the Jardin du Roi was reorganized as the Musée National d'Histoire Naturelle, in English translating to the National Museum of Natural History. In the reorganization, Lamarck found himself designated as the professor of the natural history of insects and worms. This was a field with very little documentation, and for Lamarck a field that he had not done any serious research into, with his most notable achievement in the field at the time being his collection of seashells. Despite this, Lamarck would embark on the task of researching, studying, and documenting the field, with him even being the one to coin the term invertebrate in reference to it. In his personal life, he would marry Charlotte Reverdy after his previous wife's death the year prior. After Charlotte died only a few years later in 1797, he would marry a new woman a year later named Julie Mallet. 1801 marks the year he first began to publish his evolutionary theories, notably being quite stern in his belief in evolutionary change compared to his contemporaries. A year later, he would be the one to coin the term biology, write and publish a book on the geological history of the Earth, and in his more physico-chemical writings found himself advancing the 4 elements theory, being knowingly at odds with his contemporaries. Unfortunately for Lamarck and high school students everywhere, we now know that there are much more than 4 elements. Lamarck would go on to publish some more books on natural history and invertebrates, many of which would also include information on his theory of evolution. In 1818, Lamarck began to lose his vision and would eventually go completely blind, needing the assistance of his daughters to live. Before he went completely blind, however, he would publish the 2nd volume of his book on the natural history of invertebrates. Being poor, obscure, and blind, Lamarck would die in 1829, being given a poor man's funeral and a rented grave. To add insult to injury, after 5 years in his grave, his body was removed, and to this day nobody knows the true location of his remains. Thankfully for Lamarck, like many famous people, he finally became famous after his death, with his theories on evolution picking up steam in the mid-1800s, going as far as to be a popular alternative to Darwinian selection until the beginning of the 1900s. In fact, in the Soviet Union, his theory of evolution would be the dominant theory until the 1960s. But what is his theory of evolution? Well, unlike the modern understanding of evolution, Lamarck did not believe things in nature happened by chance. Instead, he believed that it was a process of increasing complexity working towards what he viewed as perfection. He also did not believe in extinction, instead believing that animals disappeared because they had simply evolved into different animals over the course of history. Of course, the most famous and most important part of his theory of evolution is his hypothesis on its mechanism. Lamarck believed that the first rule of evolution is that use or disuse causes internal systems to enlarge or shrink. And most famously, his second rule is that offspring of species inherit traits that their parents acquired throughout their life. For instance, if you never skipped leg day and ended up with strong legs, Lamarck believed that your strong legs would be passed down onto your child, with the caveat that both parents had to have the trait for it to be passed down. In contrast, if you always skipped leg day and ended up with weak legs, your child would inherit these weaker legs due to disuse. It wasn't until the 1880s with August Weismann that somebody was able to seriously challenge Lamarckism, and like I mentioned in the biography section, his theory was dead in the water by the 1900s. Lamarck was an important figure in the study of natural history, and more specifically the study of invertebrates, with notable achievements such as being the first to separate crustaceans, arachnids, and annelids from normal insects, creating an advanced classification for mollusks that was better than anything done previously, and anticipating the work of cell theorists by stating that no body can have life if its constituent parts are not cellular tissue or are not formed by cellular tissue. On the other hand, Lamarck's theories on subjects like evolution may be discredited now, but his work was important for the study of evolution by nature of being the first to create a robust, in-depth theory for it. It may be easy to dismiss his theory of evolution as silly with a modern lens, but you must remember that science is an iterative process and nobody is perfect the first time through. Throughout his life, Lamarck dealt with struggle, from living in poverty, to his just suit work falling through, to his injury that got him out of the military, to the disrespect he found from some contemporaries in regards to his broad theories on nature, to his death in obscurity, never finding notoriety until decades after his death. But despite all this, Lamarck still managed to make the most of his life, and advance nearly whatever subject he found himself in charge of. Finn.